Hey, what's up? Right on. But you can see the stream, Caden? Excellent. And Alaric's here, and Arya's here, and I'm here, and Nikki's here. Great. Let's get started. All right, so for this one, we are going to be talking about tower defense. Tower defense is a type of game where a bunch of things called creeps are the little monsters, and they're going to come streaming through defined pathways normally. So each map is going to have certain defined paths that the creeps or monsters will travel along, and you as the player get to put down towers, and the towers each have different capabilities or defensive or offensive skills, and that is how you keep the creeps from destroying some objective. Maybe that's your home base, maybe that's maybe it's like a jewel, maybe it's like a nest full of eggs and you're trying to keep all of the bugs away, or I don't know. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is kind of the fundamentals of what a tower defense is, and maybe start thinking a little bit about what we'd like to do in our tower defense. So first off, just starting out with the foundation of what a tower defense is. So I found that Stardock, which is a pretty well-established long-time developer of some of my favorite games of all time, they were kind enough to make a developer's journal about what makes a good tower defense game. So I wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit. They have this great headlines, and we can just kind of read those and talk about it. If you want to read this more in depth, feel free to hit the link. I've got it in the chat. One moment. What are you?
Avon wants to join the chat so we can get in the call.
Oh, Avon. I'm gonna pull Avon in real quick. So 1 second. The live stream stopped. Still says my stream health is good, so okay. Cool. So you guys should all be seeing just a web page right now. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the variety of creeps. So remember, creeps are the bad guys. We're just going to use tower defense terminology here, and they call them creeps. So those are the bad guys that are going to be moving along those paths that you're trying to defeat all of them before they get to the objective. Maybe it's like a nest or a jewel or a reactor core or something like that. So one of the things about tower defense is that it can be really repetitive. And so what helps kind of combat that is making sure that there's enough variety in your bad guys and creeps that it doesn't feel repetitive, even if it is kind of doing the same thing over and over again. You're always going to want to present the players with new challenges. So the creeps are one way of doing that. The next thing that you're going to want to think about is the variety of towers. So what capabilities are you going to present to the users or the players so that they can think strategically? And so one of the things they talked about here is that the design of the towers and creeps should work hand in hand. So you can think in like a rock, paper, scissors design or something, where certain towers are good against certain creeps and certain towers are really not good against certain creeps, and it forces the player to think about the towers they put down. But if they're doing that, they obviously have to have some idea of what kinds of creeps to expect. So we'll get to that kind of thing in a second. So the next thing is a variety of missions. So they're going to be in various different terrains, and that is one way. The other way is using different paths where maybe certain creeps are going to be traveling down one path, and so you need to focus a lot of a certain kind of tower there. And you can make it so that you've got air units, or you've got units which are armored or have shields. All kinds of things like that can work together to make it so that it doesn't get boring, because you can keep introducing new strategic factors to the game. So the next thing is interaction and pacing. So one of the things that you want to think about is how big of a deal is it if some of the creeps get through, right? They're gonna get through, but you don't want to make it so that the player doesn't enjoy playing because suddenly it's really they've just lost because 2 creeps got through and now they're done. Right? You don't want it to be like that, but you do want to make it so some creeps will get through, and it forces the player to come up with novel new ideas to try to stop that from happening. So another one is support abilities. Now, you may have seen this in quite a few different games. where you've got your towers, but you as the player also have abilities that you can drop in on the map. So maybe you can call in a lightning storm, or maybe you can drop a meteor somewhere, or you've got the ability, almost godlike powers that you can deploy periodically. You want to be strategic with their use because they do have a cooldown timer, or perhaps you can only use them once per level. And so you want to think about what those support abilities might be. So in your mind, let's continue thinking about those. Next thing is the incoming wave panel. So you might remember when I said that if you want the player to be able to make strategic decisions about the towers that they place based on the creeps that they're going to be facing, you need to let them know what creeps they're facing. And so that is typically done in what's called an incoming wave panel. So those ones are, it's like a screen and it shows you all the baddies, all the creeps that are going to be coming your way. And it gives the player the opportunity to think about it for a second and deploy the right kinds of towers to combat that particular wave. The next thing is rush waves. So what if the player's like, hey, I'm set, I don't want to wait for this next wave to come by. Allow them to rush the waves, giving them a little bit more control over the pacing of the game so that it's more like what they want. And it gives you the opportunity to provide some sort of score or resource incentive for them rushing a wave. And so that means that when the player pushes rush, maybe they get some additional money that'll help them buy more towers during that wave. So they can kind of use that as part of their strategy too. The next one is that they suggest here, and I haven't actually seen this done in very many tower defense games, is focus fire. So that's where you can manually focus the fire of towers, and you can give the players the ability to do that. So imagine you can touch a tower or click on a tower and then click on a certain point on the map, and that's where they'll be shooting. So they'll be focusing on, like, let's say a particularly sturdy bad guy that's coming through, and you want all your towers, all of them, just fire at once on that guy. Don't even worry about the little guys. We'll mop them up later, but that's something that's pretty useful to be able to do. And the other thing that that you can do is like an orbital laser or something. They said here, that's like that godlike power, the support abilities. It might be healing a tower, it might be all kinds of things. But we'll have to think about that when we get into the actual game. So next up is a progression of the game. So we're going to want to think about, do we have maps? Like an overworld map where you're moving from point to point, and each point has its own level that you need to build towers and stop the creeps in. And as they move along the points in the map, they're kind of moving through the relatively non-existent story. Most tower defense games don't have storylines to speak of so much, but that's up to you. If you guys want to try to put a story into the game, that's something that we can try to think about too. So next up is the quality of life and interface clarity. So what they're talking about here is how easy is it for the player to have access to the information they need to make good strategic decisions. So you want to make sure that you're giving them like the health of the bad guys, that they're able to see which bad guys are coming, that they get tool tips and information about the creeps in the towers, so maybe they can start to understand that rock, paper, scissors game that you're setting up. Maybe you've got it so that here they're demonstrating shield, slowed, burning, so they've got these different visual effects that convey the status of the creeps, and that's useful too because it helps you to get a feel as the player for how long certain statuses stay in effect onto the bad guys. So here they're just giving some good examples of those different effects and different status effects and how they're demonstrated. Sometimes you can't really easily depict them in a visual way like they're showing here, and so they showed, they're putting symbols on the map above them, so you can see this like ice storms up here, or you've got little poison drops, and so those are sometimes good too, where you can just put a little icon above them like a status icon. So this particular screen in this next one, this contextualization is the big fancy word they're using for it, but what it's doing is it's just giving the player a reason to continue playing the game. So here we're talking, they call it a meta screen, and really all it is here's the map, and you are here, and you will go here next, and then there's going to be a battle to do, and then you'll go to the next battle, and the next battle, and you're moving forward in the game into new territory. And you can see this map, which is, like I said, from one of my favorites, and it's demonstrating, let's see, what one? That's Frontiers is the name of that one. And that might be the sequel. At any rate, this one's pretty great, and you can see how they've depicted the different points here on the map. And so this one's a pretty good way to keep people moving along. Next up is replay value. One of the things you can do to keep people coming back and maybe wanting to play it more is having difficulty options, so that, you know, maybe the creeps are stronger health, or maybe there's more of them. Also, you can set up bonus objectives and challenges where, you know, they have to win without using a certain kind of tower, or they have to win without having any creeps leak through. Another one that you can do is score and leaderboards. So if you make it so that it keeps track of how long it took them to beat a level, or what their score was, where their score is determined by, you know, money left at the end of the game, and the time it took to defeat it, and how many creeps they defeated, things like that. And then finally, they suggest something called the endless survival mode, which is where you're gonna fail at some point, but the trick is to see how long you can survive before you fail. And that in and of itself allows people to kind of compete, where the longer you survive, the higher your score, and then you can put up like a high score board and people can kind of compete that way. All right, so enough talking about what a tower defense is. Does anybody have any questions so far on that one?
You explained pretty well.
Cool. Okay, so then I'm going to go ahead and go back in here. The tools and assets that we're going to use is what I'm going to go over next. So I put a link in the chat. Everyone, if you want to follow along, go ahead and get Godot. I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. Yeah.
Will the like monsters and stuff have abilities sometimes?
Ah.
That's how they can get the towers down. Or...
So Arya wanted to know if monsters will have abilities, and that's something that we can think about. Maybe some monsters have the ability to neutralize a tower. Maybe some can destroy it. Maybe some can just disable it temporarily. Maybe some can spawn new monsters around them as long as they're alive, or heal their allies. So some monsters can definitely have powers if that's what you want to do. Remember, this is our game, and we can add any kinds of cool features that we want. And in fact, if you've never seen your idea in a game before, that means it's a great idea to try out. So the next thing that we want to do is first we're going to look at the game engine just real quickly. So if you go to Godot engine, that's Godot engine.org, the link is in the chat, then you'll see this page. And the very first thing you need to do is click download. So once you've done that, you're going to have a couple different options. Up at the top here is where you select your operating system. You're likely using Mac OS or Windows, so just pick one of those. But you might also be using Linux, and so if so, you can download that here. Now, the thing to keep in mind with Godot is that it has two different versions, and we're going to use the standard version. Another good way to get this is on Steam. So if you've already got Steam, just go ahead and pop Steam open, and you can type Godot, as you see it here, Godot, into Steam, and you'll be able to download it there. That will be downloading the standard version. That means that we will be using Godot script for this game, and we will not be using C#. I just don't want to get into the complexities of setting up Mono and C# in Visual Studio, so we're going to just stick with the standard one. And basically everyone should be using 64-bit. That's really all that's supported anymore. So hopefully you're not running on a 15-year-old system that's still 32-bit or something. All right, and so finally we're going to get into the assets. So the assets that I've got for this game are right here, craftpicks.net. This is not a sponsored thing. It's just I saw this and they had a whole bunch of really cool assets, and their price for getting access to them was really, really reasonable. So it was like, God, I don't even remember. It was around $20 or something for a year of access to these, and they're constantly adding new asset packages, which allows us to continually come back and see if there's any more. But one of my favorite things that they had were these 2D game kits. So one of the things that oftentimes slows people down is, they get a cool idea for a game, but they really, to be able to like visualize it and see how the game plays, they kind of want some graphics to work with. And these work really well, and they kind of provide some inspiration. So we're going to be working with the Tower Defense 2D game kit. And so that's right here. So let's take a quick review over the assets that are included in this, and you can kind of see the look and feel of the graphics that we're going to be working with here. This 2D game kit comes with the user interface elements that you see here, so the things that will be a part of our HUD. And you can see here they've already got the idea of like those godlike powers, your support powers that you can drop in on the world. You can see you can speed things up, you can pause the game, control your audio. They've got different terrain types here that we can build our levels with, and here you can see some of the tiles set up and some of the broken towers, just like the kind of the stuff you can sprinkle around your world to make it look a little lived in instead of just a static 2D image. And then moving on along, we're going to keep scrolling down here, and you can see they've got quite a few different ones. But next up, we're going to see they've got monsters. Now, one of the cool things about the way that they've done this is these are all SVG images, so you can actually take these and kind of like combine them together in new ways if you wanted. So you could perhaps give a sword to a goblin, and that's a new sword type goblin, and you can have a club goblin and a wizard goblin if you wanted. So you can kind of make your own creatures if you wanted, so your own creeps. So the art quality's, you know, decent and definitely good enough to work with for making a cool game here. Another thing that they've done that's pretty cool is they've got these all set up for Spriter, which is a great sprite animation tool, but we do not need it because Godot has an incredible 2D animation engine built into it, and it's just as easy to use as Spriter, if not easier. It's got most of the same functionality, and it will reduce the size of our application by using Godot's anyway, so it's just easier to do that, and so that's what we'll be doing. And then up next you can see the kinds of towers that they've got. So they've got support towers, and they've got archer towers and magical towers, and you can see here they've got the little support guys here that you can put in your towers to make them seem alive with like little people running around on top of them.
Wouldn't we be able to upgrade our...
Upgrading the towers. Yeah, Aria was asking if we're going to be able to upgrade the towers, and sure enough, you can see here they've kind of got that idea of being able to upgrade them. So they've got like a level 1, 2, and 3. So they've got 3 levels of towers for each of the towers that they've got. So, you know, already it's good. They're giving us some restraints on our creativity just a little bit with the assets here, and that will help us stay grounded and maybe make something out of this.
How would they be able to upgrade their towers?
So how the upgrades work is going to be entirely up to us. That's not dictated by that. So let's get to the fun part of seeing how this works. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to go to Godot, and I'm actually going to, well, I'm going to start at the beginning here in case none of you have used Godot before. Alright, so when you first open up Godot, you're going to see a screen that looks a lot like this, and you're going to click this new project button, and here's where you'll give it a name. So we may call it Tower Defense. Does anybody have any ideas for a name for this? Or we're going to stick with generic Godot Tower Defense for now, but think on that, and we will be building some assets later for like a splash screen that tells the game's name and stuff like that. Once you've done this, given it a name, and you hit create and edit, then it will generate a project for you. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on the one that I've already made, give it its own screen here, and then the next thing is that I've got some Finder windows here that are just set to look at the Tower Defense directory. That's the same one that's here, and there's the easy way to get to that is to click on that and say open in File Manager. So once you've done that, then you should see the file structure here. The next thing is I've downloaded the asset pack already, and so we're going to be using this Tower Defense one. So I'm going to go ahead and unzip that bad boy. Give it a second here. Alright, and the next thing we're going to do here is take a look at some of these. So you can see here they've got the 2D monster sprites. We are going to be making use mostly of these PNGs. So each of these...
How do we get the sprites into Godot if they're on 2 different platforms?
Yeah, exactly. So what we're going to do is I'm going to create a folder here. New folder. We're going to call it Assets. That's just what I'm calling it to keep it simple. and we're gonna go into there, and I'm gonna create a new folder, and we're gonna call this one creeps. Okay, and we're gonna make another folder. We're gonna call it towers, and we'll make another folder and we'll call it tiles, and we'll make one called UI. And I think hopefully the naming convention here is kind of telling you what I intend to put into each of these. So we've got the user interface elements, the towers, the tiles, the creeps, and we'll probably have our magical elements as well. Okay, so right here we've got our 2D monster sprites, and you can see those are all here. So I'm actually just gonna take this folder and drag it into the creeps directory here. Boop. All right, so now you'll see that, and you can see here there's actually quite a few. I'm gonna go ahead and pop this open for you. So this one here is the scorpion, and I'll show you. We'll get those animating pretty quickly actually in just a second. So the next thing that I want to grab is not the 2D monsters, but I think I want the magic effects, right? So let's go ahead, and you've got all these magic effects. Let's go ahead and drag those puppies into our magic folder. Still learning every day. All right, magic folder, and let's see here. I think you'll notice that the towers are kind of split up: archer tower, stone tower, support tower. So I think we're gonna have to snag a couple of those here if I can click accurately. So these are all different ones. So let's go into our towers, and we're gonna create a new one. We're gonna call it archer, just so that we can keep track of what's what here. Okay, and the next up we're gonna create a new one, stone. So if I could type. So here we go. We're gonna go into the stone tower game assets. Let's go ahead and do that. Boom. All right, next up is the support tower, and we're gonna probably just leave it at that for now. That is plenty to get us started. The next thing we're gonna wanna grab is make sure that we get the tiles for the map, because we do not have the tiles for the map yet. So let's go ahead and find those. Here's the GUI. So the GUI is the graphical user interface. We just called it a user interface because it's a game. Of course it's graphical. I'm having issues clicking because why can't I click this? This is funny. Okay, it won't let me click it. It's being silly. Okay, all right, dude. Okay, I had to resort to using key presses. It wouldn't let me click. It's fine. That was amazing. Okay, so here we've got a bunch of tile sets. This is, you know what? I'm gonna keep this simple. I'm just gonna snag all the tile sets. Hey, it's letting me click again. No, tiles. Boom. Okay, and now I can just go in here. I don't want these ones, so I'm gonna go ahead and delete these because I just don't want them. I only want my pings. I don't want to have to worry about all the other stuff. So I hope y'all are thinking about things you might want to do. Oh. Tailed. Oh. So this is cool. Tiled is a really cool tile map maker, and it shows here that they've made these tiles specifically for that. We do not need that, so I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of that one. All right, so we've got our assets there. Unfortunately, we do not have sounds, so you guys might need to make a bunch of sounds. I would say that the health bar belongs in the user interface section. Let's go ahead and drag that puppy in there. Yep, good, that went there.
So, are the creeps able to attack our towers if they have health?
They could. Yeah, that's up to us if we want to put that in. So, okay, so I've got, I think, enough here. Let's go back to Godot. So, now you can see that it's re-importing all of those mountains of assets that I just pulled out of that game kit that we got off craftpix.net. And we will sit here patiently. If anybody has any questions, to go ahead and throw them in chat, or just speak up in the call, and I will attempt to answer them.
I wish I could hear. Are they all just being quiet?
They're just being quiet. No one say anything.
Oh.
Caden, you still out there, buddy? So I've got Alaric, Caden, and Arya. Yeah, we're doing good. Boy, it has taken a while to import all of these. So one of the things that Godot does is with every image that it imports, it actually converts it a little bit, and it applies some filters and some other stuff. So that can be both nice and also annoying sometimes, depending on the type of game that you're trying to make. So if you're making a pixel art style game, that can be very annoying. And you're going to need to set your defaults for imports because you don't want it to do the kind of processing that it applies here. For us, we're not doing a pixel art game, so...
Are we doing a 3D one?
Well, we're doing 2D. It's just not the blocky pixel art style. It's more smoothed. So we're going to go ahead...
Like more rounded?
Yeah, things are more round. There's shading, there's light effects, things like that, so... We're just going to go ahead and
Well, it would be cool
let
if
this
one
wrap
of the
up.
one of the creeps like had a since there are probably
All right.
different maps of day and night and stuff.
Oh,
like
maybe,
that.
yeah.
If there was different maps like that, it would be cool if like a creep. It'd be cool if like a creep at nighttime they would have more power or more defense or something. Or like
Oh, yeah, that would be fun, like day and night. You could even map it to the real world.
yeah.
So if it's like actually daytime and you're playing, like certain creeps are harder to beat.
That would be so fun.
I want to make it so it uses the camera on your device to like look at the sunlight and use that to destroy certain creeps, so you actually have to go outside.
Wow, that would be interesting.
That'd be cool, right?
Yeah.
There was a game like that for the Game Boy Advance. You had to defeat vampires by putting them in the sunlight. Yeah, it was crazy.
Wow.
So, okay, so we're in Godot. We've finally imported it, and you can see that Godot kind of starts out with this default three-dimensional world here. We do not need a 3D world for what we're doing, so I'm going to click this 2D button. And another thing that we need now is the very first step. Anytime you open up Godot, you're kind of presented with this, but you've got an empty scene, and you can't do anything with that. So we're going to create a 2D scene. And you can see that the root node, that very first thing that we add, is the node 2D. We're just going to call, well, you can leave it that, or we can just call it, level 1. Let's just call this level 1. Okay. And I'm going to hit save and just go ahead and save that. Yeah, that's cool. Boom. All right. So next up, I want to come over here and I'm going to create our first creep, because that'll be fun to watch. So we're going to go like this. And the first one that I saw was a scorpion. So let's go ahead and scorpion. And this reminds me, we're not going to want to build up all of these scenes just sitting in the root of it. So we've got our assets. We probably need to add a new folder to keep our scenes. Otherwise, this is going to look pretty crummy pretty quick. So we're going to keep all of our scenes in here, and we may want to even further consolidate those a little bit so we can find them, so we can organize them a little better, so we can have our creeps and we can have our towers. So as you can see, a lot of the beginning of making a game is just thinking about what you might be doing. Maps. And so I'm kind of like setting up a structure that I'm going to be working within as I build. So you kind of have to have an idea of what you want to do. So the first thing we're building is a creep that we're calling a scorpion. So we've got our root node. It's a node 2D, so that's good. And what we want to do now is we want to add an animated sprite. So I'm going to hit Command A or Control A if you're on Windows. And so we're just type animated, and you can see animated sprites right there. So we're just going to hit enter, and it added one. It's showing us this little yellow warning. That's fine. What it's telling us is there aren't any animated sprite frames. So we're going to hit new sprite frames, and if we click that again, you can see that now I've got this cool animation window here. So let's do this over here on our file manager on the left here. We're going to go to creeps and ping, and the first one was the scorpion, and you can see, look at all those scorpions that we've got. So many. Are they all the same? I don't know. They look the same. Oh look, they've handily titled them for us. That is super great. Boy, is that helpful. So you can see that their attack has a great many frames. But let's go ahead and make an attack animation. And this is the cool part. So watch what we can do now is we can just say click, and I'm going to come down to the bottom of the attack ones, and I'm holding shift, so I click again, and I'm just going to drag those in here. And you can see now they've got all these. Now let's watch what this looks like. If I hit play, you can see him doing an attack. Who out there thinks that that is the right speed that the attack should play at?
That's a bit too slow.
How should I? How do you suppose I ought to adjust that? I'm trying to figure out what's happening here.
I've never used Godot, so I wouldn't know.
Well, should I make it faster? I'm kind of thinking I should. So
Yeah.
that's done here in the speed FPS, and I'm just gonna hit the up. I'm gonna click in there, and I'm gonna click this little up, and you can see it's gonna get faster, but pretty slowly. I think let's try out 28 frames per second here. Let's see what that looks like. That is not doing what I expected it to do. Oh, that's because I was modifying the wrong one. There we go. Boom. Oh, look at that attack. So I don't know, guys. That looks pretty good. That looks like probably the right speed. So that's good to know, because that means that they probably made these animations with 28 frames per second in mind. That may feel like a random number that I just pulled out of the air, but in case you didn't know, your eyes can not discern really more than 28.8 or something like that frames per second. So if you are exceeding that, this is why 60 frames per second is such a common number, a benchmark that all the games want to be able to play at 60 frames per second. What that means is that for every frame your eye can see, the game's actually done too. And so it results in really smooth animations. And if you can really just hit 30 frames per second, things are going to look good. So we're going to just make all of these animations real fast. Feel free to tune in. The next one is hurt. We all know that those are at 28 frames per second now. We're going to go ahead and select all the hurt ones. So you can see the process really isn't too hard to build these. I click new animation, I give it a name. I'm going to call them after the, call them that. And so I've got these idle, and we'll call that one 28 frames per second. Let's make it, so we got jump. Man, they made a lot of different animations for these. Now, we may not end up using all of these, but it is still fun to make these animations. Oh, look at him go. He's jumping, but he's jumping real slow, so let's make him fast. Boing, boing, boing. Okay, so because we don't have sounds, I'm going to make sound effects.
Ooh, remember that sound effect area you showed me a while ago?
Yeah, there's all kinds of places you can get sounds. Okay, so we got run. We're going to do run now. Swim, rock, run. Okay, we'll do 28 frames per second. We just got to make sure that each of the animations that we made are operating at 28 frames per second. Next up is walk. And set it to 28 frames per second. I'm sure if you were paying attention, there's also that loop right there. All right, look, we're done almost with a whole creep. So now we've got all these different animations, and let's go ahead and we can play through them. So there's an attack animation, there's a dying animation. Oh, I'm dead. There's a hurt animation where he took damage, perhaps. An idle animation where he's just chilling. A jump animation, he's dodging bullets, I don't know. He's scurrying along. Now, that one... What's that? Dodging a... Oh, yeah, he's dodging a boulder. So, you can see walk and run look pretty similar. I may want to make run move faster. So, that way it really looks like he's running, you know? because previously it didn't really look like he was moving any faster than when he walks. Okay, so we've made our first scorpion creep here. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my scenes creeps, and we're going to save the scorpion scene in there. Now the cool thing is, once I've done that, I don't have to make that guy ever again. I am going to give him some brains later and some ability to interact with his environment, but to start out with, you can see this scorpion, and I can now add a whole bunch of these things into the world, and I can click here, and you can see I've got a bunch of walking scorpions on my screen. So pretty cool that you can do that so quickly.
How are we gonna make them actually move though? Because right now it's just an animation of them holding still in one spot.
You're absolutely right. How do you make them move? Well, the first thing is you got to give them something to move on. So
tiles.
So for today, we're gonna just that is probably going to be the end of what we're doing. Is we're gonna set up a tile. Okay, so we're just gonna call this tile set 1 because I don't even know what it looks like yet, and we're going to import a whole bunch of tiles. So let's go to our tiles that we got here. Go to tiles 1 through 2. Our tower defense game tile set pack. What do we got? Oh, look at all these. Okay, let's take a look at these. So what's that look like? Oh, that's neat, right?
Ooh, that one's a good one.
That's cool, but that isn't what we're looking for. That's a pre-made one.
Ooh.
That's an example of what these could look like, but that's not what we want.
Ooh. Do you think like the monsters would come from there as well?
From the huts?
Mm-hmm.
Something might. So you can see now in the bottom left here, I've got all these little tiles. I'm going to go ahead and drag those in. And you see it added all of these, right? So what's cool is, now that I've got all these added, there's other ways to manage tiles in Godot. I am not as familiar with them, and I will try to become more familiar with them before the next video, but this is the way that I'm most familiar with, and so I'm gonna just stick with it. You can see here, this is hey, somebody give me a name. What would you guys call this type of level?
First thing that came to mind was a beach.
A beach?
Yeah.
Let me put that game background up there again. Oh, hello. Here's that game background.
Oh, that one?
What does this look like to everybody?
A jungle.
Jungle. Alright, so let's go ahead and call this our jungle.
Coconut jungle.
Tiles. Okay. Alright. So we're going to start with just this one, and you can see I've got all these different... Come on now. Touchpad, don't do this to me. Pan. It won't let me pan. How annoying. Let go. Oh. Well, that's fine. Yeah. That's cool. Well, it's cool. Not sure why, but it seems to think that I'm doing something I'm not.
We got some rocks and some...
So we got some basic ground. Okay, so these are all different sizes, but I think we can work with it. Maybe. Hopefully. Whoa. Did that get very tiny? I feel like those are very tiny. Some of these are not gonna work well for tiles. These are not very well made for this kind of a map building, but that's okay. We can probably still use this. So, hey guys, just so everybody's aware, I didn't really prepare any of this, so that you guys can see kind of the pains and joys of game development. We're just doing this together. I didn't prepare everything, and so we're gonna learn together how to do these things. Well, so straight up, we're just gonna go into our maps, and we're gonna call this the jungle tiles TSCM. All right. And one of the things you do next is you say convert to and tile set, and we're just gonna go into scenes, maps, and we'll call it the jungle tiles.
You know what? I almost like the game gonna smell jingle bells.
Jingle bells.
Jingle bells.
Okay, why did I do that? Well, here's why. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're back in our main level, and we're gonna add a tile map. That is a special kind of node here. And you'll notice that the tile map says, that's fine, I deleted them. The tile map says it needs a tile set. Well, wouldn't you know it, we just made a tile set. So let's go ahead and load that in. And you can see now I've got all these handy dandy tiles that I've loaded in. But I'm also seeing something here. Only the roads joined in. So you'll notice that if I click, that is way bigger, right? It is exactly 4 by 4 tiles. So what we need to do is look at our cells, and those are currently 64 by 64, which 4 times 64 means we have to do much larger tiles than we were doing before. So let's try that again. Ah, excellent. So let's see if these actually line up. Hey, look at that. That is lovely. It is actually working, and you can see that. Oh, what happened there? That is not right. That doesn't line up, does it?
Well, it is only fitting in one block. They should have made it turn a little.
So it's interesting because you cannot effectively join these now. Let's see. Do you see that, Alaric? Can you believe this? Can you? What is going on? Look, how am I supposed to? You just what? You can't do it? You can't.
Maybe if you try a different tile frame, they fit in different tiles.
That's really not great. I'm gonna have to think on that. So instead of look, you can't. Oh, if I turn, I can't even. Okay, let's flip that bad boy. Let's try that again. Nope, that didn't work either. Tisk. So what we're gonna have to do is actually play around with these tiles a little bit. They are not properly formed for use in a tile map. I believe they were probably made with the intention of you just creating a map from the beginning like they did here, and then manually piecing this together and then just having a single static image instead of using them for a tile map. So we can also do that. That makes building levels harder. I feel like we're probably at the end of attention spans here. So I'm gonna go ahead and call it, and we're gonna pretend that I just made this beautiful map, and I'm gonna turn that off, and I'm gonna drag a scorpion on there, and that way we can end with something that looks kind of cool, at least.
I like the little scorpion.
So we haven't really
they're
made a game
giants.
yet, but
We got some basics.
that is interesting. Okay, let's add a camera. I'm not done yet. We gotta add a camera, and then once we've added a camera, we gotta see how big it is. Okay, so let's go to the zoom on the camera, and we'll make it bigger or smaller. Yeah, bigger. We'll do 10. 10's too big. Let's do 4. 4 is just a smidge too big. 3.75. Yeah, that's right. 3.75. Okay, that'll do. That's a little bit too much, but that's cool. That didn't do anything. Oh, you know why, guys? Because here, whenever you put a camera down, you gotta tell it it's the camera that's gonna be used. And now you're gonna see it's gonna look a little funky. It didn't do what we wanted.
Oh yeah, I noticed that the purple thing went out farther than that.
So let's do one, and I can take this camera, and I'm gonna go ahead and move it, and it's here, so it'll be on those scorpions. I swear, that's it. Now you can see it. The scorpions are on there. So next time, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna do some work off camera here and try to make it so that these assets can be used with the tile map, so we can just build a map. And then the next time, what we're gonna be talking about is pathfinding. So how do we make these little creeps move along the path that we define? And that is going to be actually pretty tricky, so I'm going to do a little bit of preparation. The next episode is going to be Thursday night at 7, so feel free to join me, tell your friends, have them hop on. We're going to make a game. Between now and then, go ahead and think about what you might want to do in a tower defense, and maybe think of what you could do with some of these creeps. hit that URL that I sent you and read up about tower defense, and hit the other one and look at the different assets that come in this so you can kind of spark your creativity. So that is going to be it for tonight, and I hope you guys all enjoyed it and maybe learned a few things on the way. Happy gaming.